Just make sure the link got tweeted out.
Yep.
I wish there was a way for us in here to see how many people are watching. Seems like that would be a logical thing. We're going to have to wait for Doug to tweet at us how many people it says there are.
Yeah.
I guess I could pull it up on YouTube and see how many people are watching there, but I don't know if YouTube or Periscope, because it's on like 6 different channels. Well, if anybody's here, shoot us a little comment so we can see you. We'll wait and make sure people are here before we get too started.
Oh, shot it out. Look, see, good thing we waited till 2 o'clock. Or we might have had breaking news during.
Yeah. All right, so we've got at least 3 people. Doyers Talk, Brandon Johnson, and Tony V. Hey, guys. Thanks for joining us. I'll tell you guys before we get started on the official podcast part, I'm on my laptop. Even though I'm in my same room, I brought my laptop down because my iMac is having issues, keeps crashing on me. So that's why the video quality isn't as good, because I'm just using my MacBook's built-in camera. But, I don't look that good no matter what the camera looks like. So,
yeah, maybe it's an upgrade.
Yeah, maybe. The fuzzier the better with
less pixels.
Yeah. All right. I guess, yeah. Should we get started, Vince?
Yep. Let's do it. Hello, Kathleen.
All right. Get us started, Vince.
Oh, yeah, I am host. Yep. All right, here we go. Yo, Dodger fans. Welcome to Locked On Dodgers. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 local sports daily podcast network. Locked On, your team every day. I don't know if today's episode is brought to you by anything, but this is the daily podcast covering the Los Angeles Dodgers, bringing you the smart fans' perspective on our boys in blue. I'm Vince Samperio, Chavez and Fiends. I'm here with Jeff Snyder of Baseball Essential. Jeff, the trade deadline, for 54 minutes, it looked like the Dodgers had not made any trades. And then in the 55th minute, we got word that there was a trade.
Yeah, and it wasn't, it's not the one that we had talked about much, but it's one that kind of makes a lot of sense. And so, yeah, we'll definitely dig into that for sure.
Yeah, we'll get into that. We'll get into the non-trades, and then we'll get into your guys' questions. Some were deadline related, but it could still be answered, and some weren't deadline related, and obviously those will be answered. So before we do that, a quick reminder to subscribe to Locked On Dodgers wherever you get your podcasts. And when you get in your car or if you're at home, tell your smart device to play a podcast, Locked On Dodgers. All right, Jeff, so the Dodgers announced that they traded Ross Stripling to the Blue Jays for 2 players to be named later. So obviously nothing that's going to help them this year. They get rid of a little depth in the rotation and essentially welcome Tony Gonsolin to the rotation full time.
Yeah, for sure. And that's kind of what we've been hoping for anyway. Obviously, we all have nothing but fond feelings towards Ross as a person. But, on this current Dodgers team with World Series aspirations, we have talked about that a lot, that it has been their least effective starter, probably, and he doesn't have the stuff that plays up in the bullpen. And so he has always kind of fit that type of, he would be a good 4th or 5th starter on a team that doesn't quite have the aspirations that the Dodgers have. And so while we wish him well personally and we'll miss him, his personality and all that, I think it's a trade that makes sense for the Dodgers to have made.
Yeah, you just look at even just mapping out the next couple years when Stripling is still under team control. You have Bueller, who's not going anywhere. You have Julio, who is still under control. You have Dustin May, Tony Gonsolin, Josiah Gray coming up. You have Clayton Kershaw likely adds time. They still have David Price next year. After this season finishes, so the rotation was going to be full for a little while. We remember Stripling mentioned the fact that he didn't feel like he got a fair shake in spring training for a rotation spot. So it ended up working out because of the opt out and because of injuries, but he likely wouldn't have started the year in the rotation anyways. And they had seemingly taken care of him a little bit by sending him to the Angels with Jock Peterson, but then that trade broke down. So, for Ross Stripling, on his personal side, it's a good move. He's probably going to get, a chance to start for a potential playoff team and a team that still has, is only getting better. They have a lot of young guys, whereas for the Dodgers, there wasn't quite room for him. He didn't necessarily pitch to keep himself in the rotation, and I think it's going to work out for all parties. And with players to be named later, they're likely some type of prospects. And for what Stripling is, it might be someone that slots into maybe top 20 Dodger prospects, maybe top 10, depending, and kind of just continues to replenish what they already have.
Yeah, we won't know how to judge this trade at all until we know who's coming back. And you guys probably all noticed there's been a lot of players to be named later trades, a lot more than usual at this trade deadline. The reason for that, if you're not aware, is that only players in a team's 60-man player pool can be traded this year, whereas usually teams can trade anybody in their organization. So usually the player to be named later is for just one or two little minor rare reasons. But this year, if you want any prospect who isn't in the 60-man player pool, it has to be listed as a player to be named later. And I don't know when that opens up, the end of this season or what, but we'll find out probably in October or November who the Dodgers are getting for Stripling. We might find out sooner than that. There have been some trades I've seen that names have leaked out, even though they can't be officially traded yet. And so we might have some inkling before that, but most likely we won't know for a couple months who the Dodgers are getting in exchange for Stripling. My one worry for Ross personally is I don't know if you've watched any of those games in Buffalo, Ross. What's your name? Vince? Not Ross.
Ross might be watching.
Yeah. I hope he's watched some of those games in Buffalo. It seems like that ball flies there. I don't know if it's because it's a minor league stadium and so players feel like they're facing minor league pitching or what, but there's been a lot of home runs in that stadium, and as you know, Stripling that's been basically his biggest struggle this year is giving up the long ball. So I'm a little nervous for him in that regard, but I'm excited for him to get an opportunity to play a bigger role. He was probably done in the starting rotation for the Dodgers soon anyway, and so good for him.
Yeah, all good things to say about Ross Stripling, and we wish him well. He joins Ryu out there, so it won't be completely unfamiliar for him. We'll call it right here, and we're going to come back and we're going to answer all your guys' questions. So we will do that. All right, we're back, and we're going to here to answer you guys' questions. We're going to pass on the obscure former Dodger for today in order to get to all the questions and our thoughts on the trade deadline and everything else. But before we get into the questions, I don't see – okay, there is one question about it, so we'll get into this first. A couple questions, actually, from – at Rock51 and at Angel Arellano 9. They basically ask about the Padres. Is there concern in a 3-game series? What do you think of how they've been elevated to media darlings? And then Angel asks, should the Dodgers be nervous about the Padres with all that deadline activity?
Yeah, and that's not super nervous, I guess, but it's whatever it is. The Padres are not any more of a threat to the Dodgers in the division in 2020 than they were. And honestly, like we talked about on this morning's show, the moves they made yesterday don't mean that much to me. Mitch Moreland, I know he had a big home run against the Dodgers in the 2018 World Series, but Mitch Moreland to me is not a needle mover, to borrow Dave Roberts' phrase that he used. Jason Castro, I didn't know he was still a Major League Baseball player. And obviously that says more about me than him, probably, but still. And so those moves don't. Obviously, the Clevenger trade is a bigger deal, and Clevenger definitely improves their rotation. But also, I don't know, like Clevenger doesn't scare. I didn't want him on the Dodgers, not just because nobody likes him. I have mixed feelings on not getting a guy because of his personality, but I just don't think he is an ace. And so, if the Padres think they're getting an ace, I think they're going to be disappointed. And I think the Dodgers lineup is better than Clevenger. And so, if it means the Dodgers win some games 6-4 instead of 8-4, okay, great. But I'm not worried about it, and I'm glad the Padres are improving because it is more fun to have other teams in the division who are trying. And on a day that we saw the Diamondbacks basically trade everything they have of any value, it's good to see the Padres trying.
Yeah, I mean, competition, you got to embrace it in the division. The Dodgers, other than 2018, which was more on the Dodgers playing bad than anything else, they haven't really had too much competition in this run of division wins. But when it comes to all in all, I believe a 3-game series was mentioned. Unless the Padres fall very crazy, the Dodgers will not have a 3-game series with the Padres. It would be a best of 5 in the NLDS, more than likely, if they continue on this pace that they've been on. So in that type of series, obviously a shorter series allows for a little bit more wackiness. But at the end of the day, the Dodgers' strength is hitting against right-handed pitching, and all the Padres' main starters that would start in a playoff series throw right-handed, and it would be a fun series. It would be stressful, just like we mentioned on this morning show, just because it's a in-division team and stuff like that. And maybe some of those guys on that team are too naive to realize the playoff moment. Just not naive in a bad sense, just that they're young and a little bit careless in that sense. So, but other than that, on paper, if the Dodgers play the way they should play, they should win. And it doesn't make me worry any more than I already do worry, because I already expect the Dodgers to hit 100 and give up 5 runs every game in the playoffs anyway. So anything above that is always a benefit for me.
Yeah, you're not exactly what we call a playoff optimist anyway.
No, not at all.
And I've seen a few thoughts. I actually just threw this comment up on the screen. I've seen a few thoughts along these lines that the Reds make people nervous. We saw somebody tweeting about that. But I think the Reds are kind of the same principle you're talking about with the Padres. This guy Luke, he mentions Bauer, Gray, and Castillo. They're all right-handed, and yeah, they're solid pitchers. But I like the Dodgers' chances in that series, especially all things considered. Even when you take into account pitching matchups, I think the Dodgers are a much, much, much better team than the Reds, and I think obviously in a 3-game series, there's more chance for the much, much, much better team to lose the series. But there's no team. The team that scares me most in the postseason is the Dodgers, for good and for bad.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to Bauer, Gray, and Castillo, yes, those are 3 really good pitchers. But it's not like the Reds are winning 3/5 of their game. They're under 500 right now. So then it goes to the rest of the team. And the biggest part, too, is in the playoffs, we've seen for the most part, starting pitchers don't last as long. You get more stressful innings. You get guys taking more pitches, especially against the Dodgers. So there's a reason the Dodgers own the 7th, 8th, and 9th inning so far this year, and that's because they get into teams' bullpens earlier than usual. And by the time they get to some of those later guys, it might be guys that aren't normally used in those situations or that are normally used, but it's just a matter of fact of the Dodgers getting to them. So you got to incorporate everything. Last year, the Dodgers ran into a little bit of a buzzsaw with Scherzer and Strasburg. I don't think any team has that, where they can rely on those guys to go for sure 6-7 innings no matter what. Some of these guys could possibly go only 4 innings in a playoff anyways.
And even last year, Steven Strasburg was in line to be the losing pitcher in the game that knocked the Nationals out of the postseason until bullpen management messed that up. And so, even the Nationals, the Dodgers are the reason that they lost that series last year, not Strasburg or Scherzer.
Yep. All right, let's go on to another question.
I actually noticed, Vince, a lot of people maybe misinterpreted what you tweeted out about the trade deadline. So we got a lot of trade deadline questions on Twitter, but we also got a couple that I thought were funny,
Yeah.
that were trade deadline questions, but recognize that we were going to be recording this after the deadline. So they were guessing what moves would be made and wanting us to analyze them. And one that made me laugh was, do you think Austin Barnes was too much to give up for Francisco Lindor? That trade did not end up happening. That one fell through at the last minute, unfortunately. And we had one about Lance Lynn, same kind of thing. With the acquisition of Lance Lynn, can you think of any holes the Dodgers have on this team? That was from at Kobe Shack Goat Duo. And the other one, the one about Barnes for Lindor, I lost it, was at 3 UCLA 4, I think. That's what my bad eyes say. But yeah, I think the fact the Dodgers didn't trade for Lance Lynn when it looked like they might is probably worth talking about, right?
Yeah, definitely. He was a guy that we talked about who improved the team overall. The wording that Dave Roberts used was move the needle. And Lance Lynn, based on how he's been pitching this year, would be moving that needle and would kind of go along the lines of what Friedman has done in the past. Although this guy, Lance Lynn, would have an extra year where Darvish and Rich Hill and those guys were free agents at the end of the year. So they ended up probably paying a little less. And maybe that's what cost them. I know there was a few tweets saying that the Rangers' asking price was a little too high. And when you see what the Padres gave up for Clevenger, a guy who pitches very well and still has team control, I think, until 2022, and the Padres gave up no top 100 prospects and none of their top 5 prospects personally, you got to imagine that maybe the Rangers were trying to get something of that extent, or the Rangers remember who the Dodgers traded to get Yu Darvish, and no offense to Willie Calhoun, but nobody's really worked out yet in that trade. So, not sure what exactly the Rangers were looking for, and they kind of maybe getting a little too greedy may cost them, since they're not good right now and they don't really have the makings of a team to be good in the future.
Yeah, that was one that what I thought how it would play out would be the Rangers would hold out, and then at the last minute they would take the best offer they had gotten. They'd ask for the world, but then at the last minute they'd recognize we're not good. We're not going to be good next year. Lance Lynn's value is never going to be higher. It would have been higher before the Dodgers rocked him 2 days ago. But, other than that, it's not going to get higher from here. And then I thought they would take the best offer. But I guess they didn't do that. Maybe they really did. I know the host of Locked On Rangers told me that he wanted the Dodgers to give them Dustin May and Gavin Lux for Lance Lynn. And he seemed serious. Bryce, if you're listening, if that was serious, I didn't get too much into it. I told him that would be they got Mookie Betts without giving up either of those guys. They're probably not going to trade either of them for a number 3 starter. And Bryce told me with a straight face that Lance Lynn is one of the 4 best pitchers in Major League Baseball right now. And he might just be looking at ERA, but even his peripherals, he's just not. I mean, his FIP right now is in the mid 3s. He's a good, solid pitcher. We saw the other day that he's got some good stuff, but he's definitely hittable. And so it seems like the Rangers wanted number 1 starter value for him, and the Dodgers and other teams probably properly recognized him as more of a 2 or 3 starter than an actual ace. And especially when you look at his career, he's never been this good before. He's not young. That's a nice way of saying he's old. I think I'm old and fat, so I'm allowed to say he's old and fat. And so, best of luck to Lance Lynn and the Rangers, but I'm glad the Dodgers didn't sell the farm to get him.
Yeah. And as we know, Andrew Friedman's not going to be pressured into making any trades, and he's not going to overpay. And that continues to be his MO, I guess. And next question, not about the trade deadline, from J_A_Mo. He asks, he's looking towards next year. Is Turner being re-signed, or is he let go? He mentions that he's such a big part of us, but after a while, when do you let go?
Yeah, and that's a hard one. I expect Justin Turner to be with the Dodgers next year. I don't think it's going to be as a starter, or at least not as a big part of their plans. And we've seen even this year. You know, we talked about on this morning's episode, at his age and physical capabilities, injuries are likely. Even when he was 6 years younger, the Dodgers were kind of treading lightly with him, you know, giving him extra days off and stuff. And so I don't think Justin Turner is going to be a key part of the Dodgers' plans on the field, but I do think Justin Turner is a key part of the Dodgers, and I expect them to keep him around, you know, in kind of the Chase Utley, David Freese, Russell Martin kind of role, probably. And you know, obviously Turner has some say in that, and if Turner still wants to be a starting third baseman somewhere, he may choose to go somewhere else. But I assume the Dodgers will have a lot of interest in keeping him around in a role like that.
Yeah, we think we've touched on this a little bit before, and a 2-year deal makes the most sense, where he maybe goes into next season still the everyday starter for the most part, and then go from there. The big thing being that even if the DH isn't implemented next year, it probably might, not for sure, but it looks like it'll get implemented after in the new CBA for 2022. So that's another thing. If he's still hitting, you know, even if the defense falls off a little, he can slide into a DH role, which pushes a little bit. I know Jim B, you say you asked about us about going for a real DH hitter. You mentioned Nelson Cruz. The Twins are still trying to play for the playoffs, so they wouldn't have dealt him. But I don't think the Dodgers would have gone in for anyone that's simply a DH, just based on the fact that they have so much extra talent around that, you know, slotting a guy into just a DH role would kind of not hurt it, but they don't really need it, I guess.
Yeah, and we've talked about this before. When you're as good as the Dodgers are, it's hard to upgrade at any particular position, especially when there are so few teams selling. And there were, you know, it's not surprising the Dodgers didn't make any big trades, because I didn't see anybody get traded who would have been an obvious upgrade for the Dodgers. You know, Mike Clevenger obviously would have been an upgrade over some rotation spot, but not to such an extent that it's worth giving up 7 prospects or whatever the Padres did, and you know, and bumping one of the young guys down, which maybe segues well into our next question from Kevin at Blue Goon 82. He asks, he says, Gonsolin and May will probably be the Dodgers' 3rd and 4th starting pitchers come the playoff time. Do you guys trust 2 rookies to start in games 3 and 4? He says, I like Gonsolin, but the lack of strikeouts concerns me with May, despite the wicked gifts.
Yeah. And that, adding on to that, at Murcielago Man 12 also asked about, in regards to Gonsolin's last start in the Taxi game, are we concerned about his performance and is he losing some of the shine? And then Esteban here in the live chat asked about the starting rotation and the closing, or the bullpen. So we'll talk about the starters. Dustin May pitched in the playoffs last year, so that doesn't concern me at all anyways. He even though just the 5-game series, he made a couple appearances, and don't believe he had any crazy issues. He might have allowed to run one of his appearances, but you know, him being in there doesn't concern me. Tony Gonsolin, just based on how he is as a person, doesn't concern me. The stuff is there. In terms of Gonsolin specifically, you know, he's kind of pulled himself up. He wasn't a much heralded prospect. He's kind of worked his way up, and now he's touching 98 with a nasty split finger. So, you know, based on what other teams' number 4 starters are going to be, there's not many teams that can even compare with Tony Gonsolin, who isn't necessarily the Dodgers' best number 4 starter in terms of stuff, but he's right there probably with him and Julio and May all kind of forming that last bond. And it's just going to depend. This last month is going to tell us a lot. Julio has struggled but has the stuff, and we've seen him pitch in the postseason the last 2 years. May, like I said, put too much in the postseason last year and has kind of developed himself as a starter. The lack of strikeouts does concern me, and it's been something that I've said since the year started, where he doesn't have that third pitch to kind of push him over, or necessarily a devastating out pitch. He throws hard and he gets a lot of weak contact, but he doesn't have that that pitch to go to when he needs a strikeout. So that is a little concerning, but at the end of the day, he's probably only going to go through the lineup twice and maybe a third time if he's really rolling. So with the Dodgers bullpen being such a strength and them having 28 players on the roster, the starting pitchers can go even less than they already need to.
Yeah, absolutely. And, hopefully Dustin May will. He's got another month, like you said, to work on that strikeout pitch. We've seen him working on his changeup. Some of it, he's got good secondary stuff. It's just a matter of trusting it in the right situations and everything. And so I think there's potential there. It wouldn't shock me at all to see May's strikeouts per inning bump up this last month of the season and start to get closer to where we want them to be. And yeah, and really what it boils down to is with this offense, it shouldn't matter too much who's on the mound. I mean, Ross Stripling is 4-1 or something this year, despite being pretty mediocre on the mound because the offense has picked him up. Julio has gotten a ton of run support in most of his starts, and so whoever the Dodgers are playing, they will be facing their third and fourth starters in the games that our third and fourth starters are pitching, and so chances are the offense is going to pick him up. The bullpen will pick him up, and I'm not too stressed about it.
Yeah. One thing that we didn't get to touch on the episode from this morning that did happen is the Dodgers, AJ Ramos was let go, and then he ended up getting picked up by the Cubs. With him not being there, a potential right-handed option. With Kelly seemingly not close to coming back, and Baez, I don't think he's thrown yet since the groin injury. The Dodgers still have a bunch of arms, but are you concerned at all about, not having enough right-handed arms?
Yeah, releasing Ramos was interesting to me. Obviously, like we said before, we can't see what's going on at the alternate site very often. And so I don't know what their reasoning was. Maybe even, it was a minor league contract they signed to. There may have been some sort of opt-out clause or something. So we don't know what the reason was for releasing him. But yeah, I don't know if you saw me on Twitter the other day, Vince. I noticed something about Gratterall, and I've been meaning to bring it up here, and so maybe I'll bring it up right now since we're talking about right-handed relievers. He throws really hard, but he doesn't have the swing and miss that you would expect from a guy who throws as hard as he does. And, we've talked a lot about how it looks like it's so effortless the way he throws. And I think that's working against him because he's not extending. And so there's a stat called perceived velocity, which basically means, how fast is it going and how close is the ball to the plate when the pitcher releases it. Excuse me. Aroldis Chapman is long and skinny and has a huge stride. And so his 100 miles an hour is coming at you from a full foot closer than Gratterall's is. Gratterall, he's got that short stride and everything. And so that extra foot, it doesn't seem like a foot should matter that much, but he has almost a full foot less of extension than Chapman. And I wonder if that's giving hitters just that extra split second to see what's coming. And I wonder if that's something, it's probably not something they can fix in season, but I wonder if it's something they're going to work on with Gratterall in the off season to try to adjust his delivery to get a little bit longer stride, because the obvious, getting the better perceived velocity, but also you wonder when you see him throw, if you could throw 100 without a stride, maybe he could be hitting 105 like Jordan Hicks if he actually had a longer stride. But yeah, I guess that doesn't really answer your question because we're talking about in season and that they can't do anything about that in season, but I still have high hopes for Gratterall this year, even if it's not quite living up to the potential he might have.
Yeah, ever since I first saw Gratterall throw, that was kind of my big thing, is that his mechanics aren't that pleasurable to look at. But I believe he has enough stuff to kind of get through it for this season, and maybe they'll have him work on it in the offseason. But, to the point of right-handed pitchers, I didn't think about it before. We got a question on Instagram that kind of sparked what I brought up right now. Baez and Kelly, they have a month to kind of figure it out. But if not, let's just say they don't, worst case scenario, the Dodgers go in with a bullpen with Dylan Floro, Gratterall, Jansen, and Dennis Santana Spores and Blake Trainin as potential right-handed relievers with, obviously the lefties we've talked about a lot with Alexander, Kolarek, and Ferguson, and potentially Julio if he gets bumped out of the rotation, or potentially May or Gonsolin if they get bumped out of the rotation. Do you think, obviously the Dodgers maybe weren't concerned about this, but if Kelly and Baez don't end up making it back or can't figure it out before the season ends, are you concerned with that right-handed relievers?
Yeah, and I wonder if maybe that's a point in favor of Julio staying in the rotation over May or Gonsolin, just to have one of those right-handed arms in the bullpen. I don't know. It's right-handed and left-handed doesn't mean as much to me as can get out righties and lefties. And, I think Trinan is really, really good. He's got potential to be really, really good. Same with Gratterall. Jansen has been mostly dominant this year. All those guys you mentioned. And then, you got Ferguson, you got Kolarek, Alexander, who are getting guys out from both sides of the plate. And even Jake McGee most of the time. So I'm not as concerned about what hand the pitcher throws with as just putting together the most dominant bullpen possible. And one of those pitchers, either Julio or May or Gonsolin, will be coming out of the bullpen, and all three of them have the stuff that will play up out of the bullpen. And that's so, yeah. Obviously, the bullpen's always going to be a concern for me, but it's not a huge concern, I guess.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like I said, there's a lot left to get shaken out in this last month. Very possible that somehow, some way, Mitch White gets and becomes a reliever and gets to pump his stuff when he gets it. So we'll see what happens in this final month. But it is a little bit of a point to kind of realize and see. But I think that's all the questions we had, unless you find another one. But is there anything else you want to talk about, Jeff?
Well, first of all, let's put out a call. If you're watching this right now and you have any questions about anything we've talked about or anything we haven't talked about, speak now or forever hold your peace. I'm trying to think of topics that we haven't had time to get to. I was planning on bringing up AJ Ramos if you didn't, and Gratterall's stride is something that has been on my mind a lot lately. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on the Rockies adding Kevin Pillar? He got MVP votes last year,
Yeah, he did get MVP votes. They added Pilar and they added Michael Givens, I believe. So the Rockies are pushing for that 8th spot. And honestly, the way it's going, I'd rather them get the 8th spot than the vaunted Reds rotation. So go Rockies.
Yeah, and then the Diamondbacks went the other way. They traded Robbie Ray, which probably is addition by subtraction at this point. They traded
Archie Bradley.
Traded who else?
Starling Marte,
and maybe didn't they trade the guy who had the mustache?
Andrew Chafin, yeah.
Andrew Chafin. So the Diamondbacks have apparently given up on the season again. That's
the hottest team in baseball is no longer the hottest team in baseball.
Yeah, who would have thunk? But yeah, and then the Giants basically didn't do anything, which we joked about last week. They probably got hot just enough to keep them from selling at the trade deadline, just like last year. I know Ben, who hosts Locked On Giants, actually thought they did a good job last year selling some guys and not selling other guys. I thought they should have sold Bumgarner and got something for him and whoever else, but they did get that dude from the Brewers,
Dubon.
Mauricio Dubon, who I think is going to be good eventually. But yeah, the National League West looks a lot different than it did 24 hours ago, but I do think that not different enough to make much of a difference in 2020.
Yeah, like I said, in terms, the Dodgers have a 5-game lead on the Padres with 24 games to play. Even if the Dodgers went 15-10, which would be worse than they are playing right now, the Padres would have to go 20-5 just to tie them. So, the division for this year is not a concern. It is a little bit different this year because getting second place, if you're in the playoffs, you pretty much have an equal chance, especially if they do playoff bubbles. The home team only really matters that you get last at bat. There's no true home field advantage. So the playoffs in this year's in that sense, are a little bit different, but maybe that plays up to the best talent should win, and the Dodgers have the best talent. So,
yeah, I think so. Looks like we don't have anything else from the peanut gallery, so I guess we could wrap this up.
Yeah, thank you guys for all your questions. Thank you guys for tuning in if you tuned in, or if you're planning to tune in. I know the link stays up and you can go back and watch it. So go ahead and do that if you want. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Dodgers wherever you get your podcast. Make sure to tell your friends, tell your family, retweet the tweets, post about us, all that good stuff to keep it going. We've been the number one MLB show on the Locked On MLB network for a little while now. We'd like to continue and keep that going and growing. And heading into the final month, the Dodgers are off today. September 1st is tomorrow, and the Dodgers will be the final month of this shortened season and then get into the playoffs. So a lot of ramping up, a lot of hopefully Muncy and Bellinger keep getting hot, and a lot of those things keep happening. If you want to get a hold of us, we are on Twitter and Instagram at Locked On Dodgers. Jeff is on Twitter at Snydog. I'm at Vince Samperio. DMs are open on all those accounts. Or you can always just tweet at us with questions, comments, concerns. You can also reach us via voicemail or text at 323-863-5625, or shoot us an email, lockedondodgers@gmail.com. We're here every weekday morning, and we hope you'll be with us when you get in your car, or if you're at home. Tell your smart device to play podcast Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. Have a good one.
We will talk to you tomorrow. All right. Thanks, everybody. Hope you enjoyed that. And Dodgers off again next Monday, Vince?
Yes, they are.
All right. So we'll probably try to do this again next Monday. Won't have a trade deadline to talk about, but we'll have a, 8-game winning streak to talk about or something?
Yeah, D-backs and Rockies.
Yep. So, all right. I'm going to click the... Hey, thanks, Brandon. That's real nice of you to say. Let's put that up on the screen. Yeah.
Appreciate it.
All right, I guess we're going to wrap this up and go cry some tears over Russ Stripling. So.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks. See ya.